Awesome. Well, I just got to say, welcome to the Asset Mindset Podcast, Patrick. It's great to have you on here. I'm really excited to have another fellow Green Beret, also, seventh grouper, Red Empire, right?
Yeah.
And, I just can't wait for you to share your story because you have a lot of things from your experience in the military and from transitioning out and the entrepreneur stuff that you have. I mean, that mindset, and we talk about mindset shifts here. We talk about changing your mindset, reframing, and you've had to do this, I don't know how many times through your career and what you're doing now. So it's awesome to have you on here so you can share your asset mindset with our listeners. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Patrick Flood. I am the CEO and founder of Owners in Honor, Green Beret from principally the 7th Special Forces Group at SOCOM. Veteran of 26 years, but to your point, I've had the opportunity of serving in the reserves as a non-branch qualified armor officer, a quartermaster officer, a signal officer, and then eventually a Green Beret. So I've had a lot of opportunities to pivot and then reset my mind to then focus on whatever opportunity.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to kind of start off. What was the hardest moment in your life where you realized you had to step up? And how'd your mindset change during that experience?
Hardest moment where I had to step up. I would submit that there are a couple of times we'll use a wartime circumstance. But I think that there's a non-military circumstance as well that could potentially
share them both
about me stepping up. So that we'll start talking about the war one. So the war one was so in 2007 had an opportunity to be deployed to Afghanistan as part of OEF 10, I think at the time, and went to Goresh, Afghanistan, which is in the Helmand province at Firebase Price. A lot of the team leaders or assistant team leaders have been either killed or wounded at that firebase prior to us getting there. So I kind of thought that the likelihood of me getting injured was pretty high. But it was also probably the most, I had the opportunity to in our company commander allowed us, because we were one of the senior teams, to be able to pick our AOR. And so we picked the Helmand because it was the most going on and we were the furthest away from the flagpole. And that struck us as absolutely true, I think, in the first 2 weeks. So we were on like the torch party. We went through with me, the pay agent, and sort of our level 3 to go to set up the firebase, do the transition, all the, changing of the assets from one to another. And unfortunately, the team that we were taking over from had displaced principally from the firebase to a different location. And so the assets, I would say, were not kept warm, and they were going through a bit of trauma at the time. So a couple of them had been targeted and killed, and there was one that we found out for sure was being targeted to be executed, and we didn't have the right resources at the time to be able to do anything about it because it was just 3 of us. And so what we ended up being able to do was engage our Afghan security forces to then be able to go and displace those people to somewhere else. But there were a lot of things that we did that, because it was through the Afghan system, I don't think that we would have gotten it approved through sort of a U.S. system. And I knew that if someone had to take responsibility for it, it had to be me. So I was comfortable in the fact that, it was the first week of the deployment. So it was like, I guess this could potentially be the end of my career making these decisions, but I think it's the right decisions. And the way that it turned out is that after helping that family move to a totally different province, is that the rest of our network, our human network, found out the efforts that we went through to make sure that they weren't killed. And so they became extraordinarily loyal to us, and were willing, I think, to put themselves at a much higher level of risk to be able to get us actionable intelligence than I think we would have had we sat idly by. But I think that's probably one of the most poignant And then that sort of set the stage for that entire deployment of just constantly being sort of put in a crucible of having to choose between a couple of really bad choices and then making sure that, hey, resolutely, I'm the team leader, and if someone's going down for this, it'll be me. Um, I'm not going to push this responsibility off on somebody else. So that's, I think, part of it. And then uh, personally, so this is a long story, and I don't want to waste your whole podcast talking about it. But the
If it's
when
a
I
good
got
story, roll, brother,
yeah,
roll.
so I got my career path to being an active duty Green Beret was not one that is, I would consider, linear in any way, shape, or form. And what's funny is that the more Green Berets you talk to, the more often you find out that that's the case. Like whether it's guys that are like, "Oh, I was an investment banker and 9/11 happened, and now I'm an 18 Charlie," or you're like, "Oh yeah, I was an M&A attorney, and now I'm a Delta," and you're like, "What?" I was at like a buddy of mine. I was on a national ski team, and I just didn't feel like I was engaged enough. So I went to OCS, and then I was in the Ranger Regiment as a chemo, and I was like, what? So like, there's all of these, and great,
Guilty, man. I was a real estate agent.
yeah,
9/11 happened,
yeah.
and I went in and became an SF baby with an 18 X-ray contract. And
But I think that's to my personal, obviously bias. I think that's part of the power of special forces is that one of the reasons is that it's like when people are like, "Hey, what's the difference between Green Berets and Rangers and SEALs and whatever?" And not only do we not write as many books as some of the other services, but we also I would submit that we are a lot of times that you start talking to us, we're kind of the island of misfit toys, a lot of us, where we had a certain set of attributes that just didn't fit well in the conventional military. And I think had a lot of us stayed in the conventional military, we probably would have had very short careers. And instead, we had the attributes that allowed us to be able to be. And I say this, with all respect to everyone in the force, but is we were aggressively adaptive, and we don't accept the status quo. And that's really hard for a lot of people that survive on the status quo. So, like, I mean, I don't know, you were at Fort Bragg's. Boots, boots, boots. Like you get the 82nd Airborne Division. If there's no reason to change it. If it worked in 1945, it should still work. And they're a great organization, but there's some attributes that they're absolutely unwilling to shift to meet a changing environment sometimes, and it takes a lot of effort for them to be able to do that. For us, it's kind of what we do, and so you get surrounded then by 11 other guys that all feel the exact same way, and you're either we're typically extraordinarily powerful in being able to do that, and that's, I think, why we're so successful working so far away from the flagpole in such small teams. But so you're right. So after I got out, I worked in politics, or after I got commissioned in the Army, I went to ROTC. The Army got real small. It was the mid 90s, and I ended up in the IRR. And so I worked individual ready reserve. So I worked in DC for about a year after school. I'd interned for a year at a think tank before graduation, and then I'd stayed at the think tank for another year after graduation. Ended up moving to Los Angeles, got in entertainment, was working in production for about a year and a half, I'd say, and then through kind of a fluke, I was working on a set, and then I was a production coordinator. An actor didn't show up. I fit his costume. They stuck me in the costume, and I got Taft-Hard lead, and I became an actor. And then was a working actor. Ended up because I found a way for people to pay me money to do basically just show up and be me, and so that was great. And I worked on soap operas, small TV shows, a terrible movie that no one should spend any time watching, and a bunch of commercials. And so was really doing quite well, and had been cast in a big movie called Deep Blue Sea. And I had a younger brother who is probably my closest sibling that died by suicide. And so when he died by suicide, first I went in sort of, I did I couldn't believe it had happened, like, because obviously the death happened to him, but I couldn't believe it happened to me. essentially. And that this person that I was so close to, like, how could they do that to me? And then he had been my roommate, most of our lives as children growing up. He's 6 years younger than me. So I taught him how to play basketball, like all the basic stuff that a older brother teaches a younger brother. And so, uh, thankfully, I was home kind of, you know, rightfully so, but kind of feeling sorry for myself. I'd completely ejected myself from Hollywood, made, I would say, the producers pretty upset because I just didn't show up to work when I should have started the movie. And then uh, ended up getting a cast in the independent movie that didn't go, but it was, I had to ride a horse. I'd lied about being able to ride a horse. So I had to learn to ride a horse when I was home and then like got it together. And it was, unintentional equine therapy, but got it together and then ended up, literally getting back on the horse, going back to Hollywood and then putting my head down. But that's not really the moment where I had to make a big change. I think the moment where I had to make a big change was then after continuing to be successful for about a year and a half and putting my head down and really working hard, I felt empty. Like I just didn't feel like what I was doing was serving a purpose. And I knew that the reason that I wanted to do what I was doing was to be able to engage people and that it would take me a long time in Hollywood and a lot of luck to be able to get to the point where I could, help other people or do anything. And so the Army had an opportunity at the time. It was 2000. They had cut too many people when I had gotten commissioned. So they asked us, a bunch of guys to be able to, if they wanted to come back in. So it gave us a volunteer recall opportunity. So I came back in the Army for 12 months, got assigned as a signal officer, ended up in 2nd Battalion, 3rd Group. And then 9 months later, September 11th happened. And so, like for me, that personal pivot point was saying, while I am successful doing a thing, and I ended up having this. I said this later on too to my boss when I went to Special Forces selection, who is a fantastic signal officer in the 112th Signal Battalion, is that I know that if I stayed here, I'd have a good career, but I feel like it's someone else's career. And if I don't try to do this, I'm gonna feel like I missed out on the ability to test myself to see if I could actually do it. And I think indirectly, I would even say that that's part of my motivation of even being in the military is that, do I have the mettle? Did I have the character, the values that I was imbued upon, as my family and maybe some innate characteristics given from God that then, do I have the resolve to be able to withstand some of the turmoil that happens during combat? And then unfortunately a lot of the stuff that ends up trailing along the way afterwards. And so like to me, those are sort of the two of the biggest pivotal moments where I had to like step up and be like, hey, I need to make a change. And in both cases, it was one where I felt like I had to make a decision for myself to be able to serve other people better.
That's powerful. And I want to touch a little more on the try. So you
Sure.
talked about like, hey, I want to try this or try that. For anybody in the audience that's listening, that's maybe on the fence and thinking about trying something, what would you say to them?
Do it. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. So I would I would submit so it's not as easy, of course, just like I mean, both of us went to selection, right? And we like there's not that many guys that actually make it through selection and then make it all the way through the Q course. There if you go through the paper selection then the actual selection course. And so in that, does lack you just because you want to try, does that mean you don't prepare? You just show up? So I have a great Ranger School story about that. And I would submit that, but trying it is absolutely a thing. And I think failing at it is a thing too. And so like it's, put in your best effort, prepare the best you can, trust in God, quite frankly, that there's a lesson in it, even if you try and fail. But don't not try, because I think it's in the try that is the purest form of, I think, humanity, is that if not for the willingness to try something outside of the norm, we would have no inventions, no travel, no adventure, no exploration, no nothing. Sometimes it happens out of desperation because you don't have any other choice. But it's great that when you do have the convenience that you don't have to still have the wherewithal to be able to do it. I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think try sometimes is a dirty word for a lot of people. Say, don't try, do. Or I'm
Yeah.
going to try. No, do. It's how you try. There's different
Yeah.
levels of try. Like, you nonchalant, like, I'll try that, see if I like it, or I'm going to try and I'm going to give it my all. If it happens, great.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, if I get broken, I get med dropped or the business fails, whatever, but I'm trying 100%, that's a different level of try. So don't let people talk you down out of the try thing. Like, oh, no, you can't try, you have to do. Eh,
Yeah. So
I don't like that.
I agree. I think it's unfortunately it's 80s movies that drove us to the, if walk on this side, walk on this side, walk in middle, squash like grape. Or it's the do not do not try. You must do or do not. So like great, I'm not taking advice from a 3 foot tall imaginary green person or a fictional character in The Karate Kid. And so I think a lot of it is that, and I have a young son, so he's 4, right? And uh, he's at the age where he is completely unaware of his own mortality, which is fantastic, because he does things that shock me because he tries, and so he'll look at something and he'll in his eyes you could see that there's fear, and a lot of it's fear of the unknown. And then, great example, we were just at this 4th of July event here in Texas, and they had this gigantic blow up thing, right? And it's this like climbing wall essentially that there's staircase, and then next to it there's like a rope, and then the rope is intended to steady yourself on the stairs as you go up. So, but the way he looked at it is that he was like, the stairs are, and he's like, not quite 4. The stairs are too easy. And this is like, I don't know, you had to climb up like 10 feet, 10 or 15 feet. And it's like maybe at, I don't know what angle that would be, but it's a pretty severe angle, like maybe 75%. And what he did straight up like mountain climber, like grabbed the rope and got into an L position and then hand over handed it all the way to the top. And I was like, holy Christmas. But if I had told him how to do it ahead of time, I would have limited his ability of trying something that surmounted any of my expectations. So, like, if you can try to extrapolate from that, all of us are that. And I think so many of us don't try because we bound ourselves in these sort of theoretic ideas of what is our left and right limits. And I think it's sometimes going beyond that of saying, hey, you could submit that SEER school is this, the Ranger school is this. It's like, what is the depth that you can still find your character? Or when do you fall apart? And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person if you fall apart at some point. It just means that now you know your limit. And can you then work against that limit to be able to develop it? Or is that just it? Do you just accept that as your limit and you're never going to push beyond it? But it's until you push to that point, like my Ranger school story. So all SF guys either have a tab or a story. So I have a story. So the only opportunity I had to go to Ranger school, because as a signal officer, I wasn't able to go. So at the time, now it's all different. So I'd put in packets and had always had them denied because I was in the wrong branch. And so the only opportunity I had to do is once I got my Green Beret. And so, cause then I could go, right? But the date that they gave me was 2 weeks after SEER school, and I was the XO at SEER school. So I
Ooh,
not to tell too many people about what goes on at SEER school. The XO and the SRO, the senior
responsible
officer
one.
and the senior responsible officer and the executive responsible officer are not treated the kindest during that phase. And so, and I'd lost some weight. I had 4 stitches in my eyebrow, and I showed up to Ranger school, and I was like, I'm just gonna like screw this. I made it through all of selection. I made it to the Q course. I've done a lot of tough stuff. I memorized the Ranger Creed. I was like, I'm fine. And then, I went to see the Wizard in phase 0 during the 5 mile run. I just passed out because it was 105 degrees out and I, had heat exhaustion. And, I know now that that was unrealistic of me to have that expectation to be able to push myself that hard. And so I think I've now given myself a lot more grace of saying, yeah, trying it's good, but lack of preparation doesn't isn't necessarily the best way for you to find success in your try. But it's the only school in the entire army that I failed. And so um it's and my brother had been an HSC commander down at the 6th Ranger Training Battalion, my older brother. And so it was like that was a tough call to make home. I was
Mhm.
invited to come back in a winter class, but the option would have been then not deploying with my team to combat. And so instead, I went to combat, and hopefully, I earned the equivalent of a Ranger tab during combat instead. But yeah, I'll never have it. I won't. I never went back. And so, but I'm glad that that happened. I'm really glad that I was humbled to that level, that extent at that point, because it just made me realize that there is a limit to my human capability, and that if there's a limit to mine, there's probably a limit to those around me, even though that they're Green Berets, and I really thought the world of everyone as being almost superhuman, but they're when people are doing several rotations to Afghanistan, they have family lives, they have a lot of stuff going on. You have to really be a good leader that leads with love and not just push people beyond their limits constantly. Otherwise, you're just not, to the point of what we were talking about during before the session is that, yeah, I was a signal officer, but it doesn't mean that I was an expert at every communication system. It's that I knew how to employ the people properly. And so as a team leader, it was the same thing. I was the third best of anything on my team. I wasn't the best anything. Maybe I was the best officer, but otherwise I was the third best medic, third best Charlie, third best, and so you're the third best of a lot of stuff, but you wanted to be the third best because at least you were useful. It wasn't like, okay, hey guys, you're doing this mind clearing stuff. That's great. I'm going to be over here just preparing a 9 line. No, you're in the dirt with a stick with the rest of them, being like, this is a terrible idea. We shouldn't do this. Just like everyone else is going through their mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's being a good leader, leading from the front. You're there with them, not just, "Hey, you go do this, and I'm gonna sit back here and wait and then make a call." No,
I mean, it's
that's not good
simple to
leading.
say, but in practice, it's that lead by, never ask somebody to do something that you wouldn't be willing to do yourself. And I think you hear that a lot as leaders in a lot of our leadership courses when it comes to when the rubber meets the road. There are some
Yep.
times where you're like, man, I am definitely going to die. But at least, I led from the front. Like my vehicle was the lead vehicle in in every um every reconnaissance that we were, CRP, combat reconnaissance patrol, anything. Cause I was like, I it's my responsibility. I'm choosing the route. It's my responsibility to make sure it's clear. It's my responsibility to safeguard lives. And so if at the end of the day I can't trust myself, then I certainly don't want someone else to come across a mine and then have it have been my decision.
No, that's powerful, man, and good on you. Good on you. I'm sure your team appreciated it. And I was there right with you in '07. I was Advon. We might have flown over on the same flight.
Yeah,
I went to
probably.
RC East, and I was
Yeah.
there because I'm a 3. So I
Okay.
went,
Yeah.
and I was the
Yeah.
senior Charlie, so I was the paying agent.
Yeah. So you
So
would
for
have
signing over all the equipment, like I was there with third group for a little while
Yeah, so you would
before.
have heard our call sign. So we had, I don't know, man, we had 100, I think we had 126 days of ticks in the helmet. Like our team was just engaged constantly. And so Scorpion 36 was on wideband a lot.
Okay, yeah.
Plus I didn't have a JTAC for the first like 3 months. And because the thought was, we were an ASO DA team, and they're like, "Oh, you're just gonna focus on your ASO stuff." And then
Mhm.
they were like, "Oh, by the way, as soon as my team showed up, you have to displace, go up to Sangin. We're gonna go through and take the Sangin District Center." And I was like, "Really? We don't even have our vehicles." And so, like, my team isn't even here. And, I was like, "All right, so how do we get up there?" And, like, there's a lot of weird stuff that, happened that I can't, like, I don't talk about, like, I don't proselytize or talk about God a lot, but there's been some moments that there's no doubt that the big guy had some other plan for me, because of some of the opportunities that he put in my path. So when I went to the signal course at Fort Gordon, one of the students at the signal course was a communications officer from Estonia. And so the way that they do their special forces is that they're all different background grant branches. They're not infantrymen, they're signal guys, intel guys, whatever. And so he was a special operations guy from Estonia who was in the signal course. So the Estonians in the Helmand were responsible for all the mine clearing. So I went to Bastion to pick up our vehicles, and I went to the headquarters to see where all the mine strikes were to try to determine our route. And the guy I was talking to is a guy that I'd played soccer with at Fort Gordon, and literally our, I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't Falcon View. Was it Falcon View? On our in our vehicles, I couldn't transfer what they had digitally to that, so I had to literally get a piece of plastic, do a map overlay, map everything, take our map, and then translate it into the grid coordinates, and then from that, dump it into my Falcon View. And so we took an extraordinarily circuitous route, to 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 the point that I think even the Siege of Sodif was giving us some calls occasionally saying, "Hey, we're looking at your Blue Force tracker, and, like, where are you going?" And I was like, "Oh, it's," "it's just put it this way, between our partners and where the mine strikes are, they're saying that this is the safest way for us to get there." So we got there, and it was great, but I can't imagine, like, there's too many accidents. That's a weird accident to happen, to be able
Oh,
to
yeah,
keep it
other
safe
side of the
is.
world, different, time, years later,
Yeah,
right place, right time. Like, if you ran the number, I'm no mathematician. I was a Charlie. I can do some calc and place, but, like, that's that's beyond my level. Like you said,
yeah,
there's forces at play, and God plays a lot in the
yeah,
things that
agree.
we do and that we've done. I know I've ran into people. I was doing security work in Iraq in 2010, and I ran into somebody I went through the Charlie course with, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "What? What?" Like, it's just
Yeah,
wild how that can happen.
when we were infilling into, I think I could say this, but when we were infilling into, so as a signal officer, I was selected to be part of a small group of signal detachment that was connected to the was Sigid Forward or whatever. So like General Harrow's organization that then went as a special operator directly into Afghanistan or into Iraq. And so when we were infilling, we were in Seeb, and I was on an airfield, Sylvia enclosed, like all blacked out, waiting. And a fraternity brother of mine who is supposed to be a fast mover. He was in Navy ROTC, but he was supposed to be a fast mover pilot. Ends up walking past me because he was one of the rotary wing pilots of the organizations that were infilling to secure the gas and oil platforms. And I was like, I'm not going to say his name, but I was like, "Hey, bro, um, how's it going?" Like, I hadn't seen him in like 15 years or 10 years. And we like had a chat, and then that's it. I was like, "This is weird." Like, this is way too big a picture of, like, I didn't imagine that that would have ever happened. So that was like, stuff like that is just weird. And it is kept happening sort of in my life, not to mention my career. And I feel like it's that stuff you kind of have to pay attention to, is the why is this happening? And then from that determining how do I, what do I evaluate from it, or how do I take it as some sort of guidance to be able to do whatever's next?
That's a great word, guidance, because that's what I do with a lot of the things myself. I try and be open to spirit, and
Yeah,
God puts things in front of me. It's like, all right,
yeah,
why is this in front of me? Is this a door I'm supposed to go through? Is this a door I'm
yeah,
supposed to close? But this door is here is for a reason. And I think
yeah,
for you listeners out there, you need to realize there's doors in front of you too. Whether you have faith or not, there's doors for you to check, poke your head through, walk all the way through. You should see what's on the other side. because it can change your life.
Yeah, and
So
that's where that the try goes in again, right? Is that it's the it's not in the trying, it's in the learning from the trying. So what did you learn from it? And I think it's the same sense of like being open to, God putting things in front of your face. And, how many times is he going to put the same thing in front of your face to give you an opportunity to eventually make the right choice? I think continuously, I think it's a thing. And so that's just been interesting. Sorry, I interrupted.
it's fine, and you're spot on. I mean, that's how I met my current wife. Like, she was
Yeah.
at Fort Bragg, I was at Fort Bragg. She had our first son in Womack. We didn't know each other. She like worked at a place that my ex-wife worked, but then I left and I moved out of state to be closer to family, miles and miles away. There's only 2,000 people in the town. Where does she move after her divorce and whatnot? Same small town. I go to a salon to get my hair cut. Oh, we can't help you. Go to this other salon that's right over here. They take walk-ins. I go in and there she is. I meet her for the first time. Like, how does that happen? It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
It's,
Too many coincidences to
yeah.
not have feel like there's some sort of path of guidance to it.
Yeah. So I want to shift now and I want to talk about you getting your neck broken and driving on and like tell us that story so people can understand, what you went through and your mindset and everything that's with that.
Yeah, to be fair, I didn't know that I'd broken my neck. But so I didn't have to, and getting blown up, you have this great convenience when you have a head injury like that, that people are like, oh, it was like, and I was like, I don't know. I was unconscious. It probably was very scary. But I was, I was completely unconscious for it. So, I will say that waking up from it, I was quite surprised. It's probably the most surprised that, but yes, it kind of builds upon the story where we got to the Singin, went there, ended up in a big firefight with, turns out that the place that we decided to put our blocking position for the 82nd, who were clearing the Singin, was right across the street from the Taliban headquarters. And so, we were on the high side of the road to Kijaki. They were on the low side, and, they had, much bigger force than us. They had probably a couple hundred people. We had about 28, but we were on the high ground, so they couldn't assault us. They kept trying to flank us, but because of air support and stuff like that, they were never able to do it. We displaced a couple times to keep them guessing. But our job was to really tie them down and then prevent them from, assaulting the first of the 508th, which was doing the assault through Sangin. It was great. We were doing great coordination with the ground force, which was the main effort was really the first of 508th doing all the stuff that they were doing. Good dudes, again, guys that I met at the captain's career course, which is weird. The three had been a friend of my brother's. He told me their ops plan, so I knew exactly where we needed to go. Because of talking to the Estonian guy, we took a path that was very non-traditional through a wadi, really utilizing the maximum capability of the GMVs to be able to get to where we were getting. And they were loaded pretty heavy because we didn't know how long we were going to be gone. And then, engaged the enemy. I didn't have a JTAC, so I was controlling the air too. We had 105s and 155s from Robinson firing. We had mortars that were firing from the 82nd and Sangin District Center. And then we had fast attack. So we had like Dutch F-16s, which were the fast movers that helped us, which is always interesting to do air control with a guy who's at, whatever, 25,000 feet, talking to, and he has a Dutch accent. And so you're like, oh, Christ, like I could barely control air. And now I'm also trying to translate Dutch. And I have a 50 cal above my head just hammering away.
Oh man.
So, at any rate, but it was great because it was interesting where, um, it's like you in times of crisis. I think you don't become superhuman. I think you fall back on your highest level of training, and we had done a great deal of training. Our PMT was great. We went to Hawthorne, as you recall, beforehand, and it was, I think, super realistic to what actually happened. At the time, I was like, this is never going to happen. I've seen all the rotations in Afghanistan. You get a JTAC. No one's going to do this stuff. But the reality of it, I didn't have any of that stuff when the rubber met the road, and I had to do it all myself. You know, day 2, it's like, I think in the afternoon, I think, and, I can't remember if it was morning or afternoon, but it was during prayer time. So I looked across the road. I had a Viper to do a to set a target reference point, to have 155s shoot in sheaf, so in a line, down the tree line, because I think that's where they had all moved back to. So I was setting it up and, had set up the near side TRP, or the lead TRP was setting up the far TRP. And the I was using this hole in this mud brick wall that was there to laze to figure out exactly the GPS coordinates. And they must have seen my shadow moving past the wall. And next thing you knew, I was on my back. The wall wasn't there anymore. And I was on my back with my head facing downhill, and the vehicle at my feet, my vehicle was on fire. And, I did the whole dummy check of, self check of, do I have
Do
all
I have
my
all my
fingers?
pieces?
Do I have all my pieces? Because it's super embarrassing to get up and run if you don't have legs. And so I decided that, yeah, okay, I have all my parts. So now I'm going to get up and move, because I was totally exposed. So got up and moved as, fast as I could. It turns out my helmet was scarred probably by a fin, from the recoilless rifle. So I was kneeling down. So they had fired a little bit too high, went over my head, hit the vehicle behind me. And then, my senior medic got catapulted out of the cupola, out of the gunner's position, and he was sitting on the side of the vehicle. Some of this stuff I remember, actually, like vividly remember. Some of it is I saw a Predator video of some of it, so some of it is not stuff that I actually remember, but it's stuff that I think I've pieced it all sort of together. But ended up treating him, put tourniquets on both of his forearms because his arms had been cut coming out of the turret. It wasn't bad enough for him to actually need tourniquets, but there was blood everywhere. So, it was just the best I could do. Thought that our driver was still in the vehicle, so I went back in the vehicle looking for him. Couldn't find him. Thankfully, he had gotten out of the vehicle, and then moved the medic over to cover. And the junior medic came over after he was done treating the senior medic. And then, I was a little woozy, so he taped a smelling salt to my chest, and he asked me if I needed, like, what I needed. The team sergeant was a little bit, I think, overcome by events a little bit. And so good dude, but, had always been an assaulter, and this was not that. We were definitely not in control of this situation. So, uh, like, my vehicle was on fire, moved to a different vehicle, got on the comms, and then just drove on. And, for another day plus, we ended up, again, strange circumstance. There was this detachment of snipers from the 1st to 508th, that had vehicle trouble when it was just the 3 of us at the firebase. And they came in, and we had a mechanic, an Afghan mechanic, that fixed their Humvee. And then they continued on. They heard us on wideband so much that eventually they showed up, and they knew that, because I think you have to say at some point that it was, that the ground force commander was doing tactical air control instead of a JTAC, because I
Mhm.
did sign off using my signature. And so they knew I didn't have a JTAC. And so they showed up because they had one. And so on day 3, when I was kind of, they showed up, taking hits of a smelling salt just to stay conscious. And so they showed up, and then they helped quite a bit, and they're great dudes. And then between them and, at the time, sort of our senior Bravo/Fox, they slaying dudes across the street with their rifles. And so there was with their sniper rifles, to the point that, like, the Bravo, or the Fox, ended up getting a Valor Award for it. But just good, super good dudes. Completely suppressed the enemy, enough so that they eventually displaced, and then the 1st of 508 took over that compound. And then we withdrew. We got replaced by another team, uh, and, and then I got in a helicopter, went back to Kandahar, went to the Canadian clinic. They said I had a concussion. I said, Roger that, and got back in a different helicopter, a State Department helicopter, and went back out to my firebase. Because I was like, so what? People get concussions.
Yeah, that happens all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, went back and then drove on. Then, uh, about so that happened in April, and then I think in maybe it was June, I think, I got bit by then a cobra during a firefight, so that was interesting. Um, got medevac to Bastion, um, survived it clearly, and then a different team, from I don't know, I guess they were from our battalion, but not our company, but had gotten shot up sort of in the middle, like, of, Helmand Province, and they showed up, and there were only so many beds in the hospital, so I called my team, they came and picked me up, so I checked myself out, what is it, against medical advice or whatever, and then went back to the fire base and continued on, and then about 3 months later, we had a mine strike, and it wasn't actually my vehicle, it was a vehicle next to mine. But from that, apparently, because I hadn't really recovered from the first concussion, my eyes stopped working, my brain swelled, it occluded my ocular nerve in my left eye, and so I had to go back, and then they sent me back. So I missed like a month of the deployment, and probably about 6 months on my team. Because I should have been on the team for almost like 2.5 years and ended up spending almost exactly 2 years on it.
You crushed it, man, from what I'm hearing, and went through the grinder. So,
I
don't
mean,
don't beat yourself up. You didn't do 2.5 years. You did your you
yeah,
did
I
your
mean,
part, brother.
but it's,
You know,
it's one of those things where you just, you're working with great guys and like my senior Delta who got injured early ended up getting injured a second time, more significantly. We lost a British LNO that had been attached to us. Uh, like it is what it is. I think it's difficult, and I think you see this. And this is maybe the best analogy ever. You see it with like professional football players sometimes, like even Troy Aikman. So the reason he left wasn't because he wasn't an effective quarterback anymore, it was because he got so many concussions that he wasn't a true value to the team. And so he didn't do it really to preserve himself. He was like, this isn't a good thing for the team. Because if I get hit right, I'm done. And and so like it kind of, it was bittersweet for sure, but I knew that them getting a different team leader was probably better than me trying to just put my head down and tough it through it because I mean, straight up, I couldn't see out of one eye. And I think I'm really glad that the group commander at the time and the group surgeon overruled anything I said, and because they really did take care of me because I would have stayed there.
yeah,
And
that you would have been like in Ranger School.
well,
You would have
I
kept
would have,
going until you just dropped.
yeah,
Then
I would have,
what good are you then? Now you're a casualty. They got to carry you. So,
come back,
no,
yeah, carrying your shield or on it. No, I definitely would have been on it again, and that's not a it's you. It gets to a point. It's like they talk about it a lot of times with leaders, right? Is that leaders a lot of times they put so much emphasis on leading the men and giving everything they can to the men and doing being a really supportive leader. Leaders eat last, like all of this stuff, right? That sometimes it your self-care takes such a back seat that it ends up becoming a detriment to the team. Like I've seen senior leaders, "Oh, I haven't slept for 3 days." "Great, sir, you're making terrible decisions. Go get a nap." Like like terrible decisions. Like you're like seeing things. Like go get sleep. Like you're not going to win any awards for not sleeping 4 days in a row. Like if you don't have to do it, don't do that. It's like I think we even get this during phase 2 during the Q course. Don't stand if you could sit, don't sit if you can kneel, don't kneel if you can lay down. Like take your opportunity to reserve energy because there's going to be times of massive energy output that you're going to need those reserves. So don't make it harder on yourself just because you think it's hard or you're hard, metaphorically harder, to make things more difficult.
no, it's a balancing act, and you need to learn to walk that line. Like push yourself when you have to push yourself, but if you don't have to, conserve the energy, just like you're saying. And I think listeners can get a lot from that. I think that's very important. You need sleep. You need
Yeah.
to eat healthy. Like you need to do certain things. Like, yeah, you can skip a meal for something important, or hey, you can stay up extra, maybe pull an all nighter, but you can't do that every day. You'll burn out.
Yeah, and there's some superhuman people like you hear about the General McChrystals of the world who like they get 3 hours of sleep a day and they do all this other stuff. But that's first off, I don't believe 100% of that. Secondly, because I've seen it in action and I'm like, no way. Horrible decisions are being made, not by him, but by other people that are like trying to say, hey, oh, I could survive on 2 hours of sleep a day. No, you can't. Like that's just dumb. It's arrogant. And so like you don't want to have your ability be overmatched by your arrogance. Arrogance is good in the sense that it's confidence is part of arrogance, but if it gets to the point that it becomes a detriment, it's definitely not a good thing. And it's the whole analogy of in a plane crash, you put your oxygen mask on first, and then you serve other people. So it's not selfish to do that if you're not, you know, serving yourself differently than other people, then I think you should take care of yourself.
Absolutely. And I think for anybody that's a leader or management, listen to that because those are some good words. Great job, Patrick. So I want to talk to you about your entrepreneur stuff now that you're doing. Like, why don't you share that with the listeners and how all those stories that you just shared, how that has transitioned
Yeah.
into what you're doing now?
So I'll start with, I think a principle that I've been talking about quite a bit, and because this is kind of where it really started out from, is that I think a lot of the difficulty of veteran transition comes from the fact that if you accept that the two guiding principles of most existence is love and fear, and people call it sometimes abundance or scarcity mindset now, is that those are the two driving, impetus or impetize between, for human beings, then from that, what is a reason or contributing factor for difficulty psychologically during transition for veterans? My hypothesis is that if you are a veteran, especially one who's served in combat, the profundity of love that you've actually felt in a very real way from the people that you've served with is very difficult to match on the outside, even with family, even with, maybe with a child, it's similar, but but that's one direction. That's servant sort of love. But the fact that you're the recipient of really sacrificial love, like, which I think is one of the most, you know, one of the highest levels of love. And then you get out and really it's more of pure capitalistic environment where every man for himself and that there's opportunities to team with people, but it's usually for a self-motivating end. And everyone kind of has, we used to mock it all the time, in SF, is that, oh, I don't like that dude, he has an agenda. And like in the corporate world, everybody has an agenda. And so it's by really it's less likely that people grow into a team and then build something together. It's more like, hey, we're kind of forced onto this team. We have to do it for a little while, et cetera. So from that, looking at it from the veteran transition standpoint, it's that, so, okay, so you're missing this tremendous sense of love. And maybe that's a little bit of the, the absence that you're feeling that causes a psychological distress. So that's part of it, right? So how do you counteract that? If you accept that that's true, then it's how do you mitigate it or counteract it? So my concept is that there's a lot of transition organizations that then you sort of your tribe's your tribe. And then it's just a matter of I'm a tribe, but I'm in a different point in my existence with the tribe, or I'm in a different chapter of the book, but I'm still in a tribe. It's the challenges, and I saw it when I was working a little bit in corporate America, a little bit helping the Honor Foundation, a little bit with a couple other things, is that veterans, I think, are extraordinarily well suited to be entrepreneurs. Yeah, my dad and grandfathers both were veterans and entrepreneurs. And I think a lot of them don't pursue it because of the volatility of it. And so partly because most of it is seen as, in order to be an entrepreneur, you have to come up with your own idea. You have to, start it from scratch. You have to be able to build it from scratch. That's maybe the most pure form of entrepreneurship. But in essence, there's different ways of doing that, and that's through acquisition. Give me one second. And through acquisition, And it's less volatile. You It's maybe even more natural to a veteran who's served in the military, who is naturally transitioned into different units and then therefore have to preserve the legacy of the unit, understanding that it's not about you or the ego, it's about the organization, and that eventually you will also displace and someone will come after you. So it's really understanding legacy building, understanding that as a small business owner, you could do things directly to community, to contribute to a community, like all of those things. And so I was on this panel with the Honor Foundation, and I was on it really as a corporate partner working for my financial firm, Anderson at the time. And because of COVID, they just happened to have the entrepreneur panel the same night. So they ended up on the entrepreneurs panel, primarily focusing on this venture opportunity and of starting something new. And
Hmm.
this is, veterans are good for it. They had a guy who had, you know, gotten angel invest in, and they had, I think, someone from Black Rifle Coffee Company who had talked about, starting something. And I think it's great. There was a guy though that stood up, like great American, E8 Navy special boat team, who was like, "This is great, but I don't know Emmett Smith, and I don't have $1 million, and so how do I become an entrepreneur?" And how that, and turned to the group, and he's like, "And how the f can you help me? Because you said you could help me do this." And I was like, said you could help me transition." So they were, that's not what the Honor Foundation does. So they were like, "Meh, uh, we would love to be able to help you." I, at the time, was working, and part of what I was doing at Anderson is I was overseeing the mergers and acquisitions vertical that we just acquired from Deloitte. And so I was helping them market themselves and get to, put out the word and what they were doing. So I had to understand what they did. So I was like, "Oh, there's a different thing. Plus what my dad did, my grandfather did." I was like, "I feel like there's this acquisition pathway that would be good for you." And I was like, "Oh, I went to business school. I know a couple people." And so I tried to help this guy for a couple months and I couldn't. And I was like, I was finding one-offs of like, this guy's helped a person do this and this guy's helped a person do this. And I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. There's got to be some nonprofit that's doing this, or somebody that I can connect these guys with to be able to get them the ability to then be able to do this, because this is too much for just me to be able to do. And so, plus I had a full-time job, and, I had just transitioned myself. And so I was trying to keep my head above water. Plus my now ex-wife was pregnant, and there's a lot of other stuff going on. So I was like, man, I got too many irons in the fire. I can't do this too. Like, I would love to be able to help them, but I can't figure out, it's not easy for me to be able to do it. And so put a pin in it. And, this kind of goes back to knowing your limits. And so I put a pin in it, but it's not like I stopped thinking about it. And then, had an opportunity later on, to then move to Houston. My wife had some health issues, or has some health issues. She moved to Houston, with our son. I tried to work, as a geo bachelor in LA for about a year, retain my job. They gave me an opportunity to move to, the firm did, to Texas, but I would have to take a pretty significant salary reduction. Instead, they gave me an opportunity to to essentially be furloughed, where they could give me a severance package. And then extraordinarily generous company gave me a 9-month severance package, which, through negotiation and stuff. But I thought that then I would go be a consultant or do whatever, and had a really great mentor that I'd met during Army recruiting, who's a big supporter of the military, but not a military veteran himself, but an entrepreneur. He had kind of put the bug into me years ago about, maybe owning my own thing at some point. And so I was talking to him, and I was like, "Hey, this is what I think I'm doing. I think I'm going to go search for my own business. I think I have the right network, and I'm going to go do whatever." He goes, "Well, every time I talk to you, you always turn the conversation into how are you helping these other people do stuff? Like, it seems like that's the most fulfilling thing for you. And I don't think you're worried about being a wealthy person. Like, you have pension and disability, you have some sort of backstop. Um, and and I think that you want to, because you were making great money in Anderson, and you could have done that in the consulting world, but you chose not to do it for some reason, because it must not have been just about the money." And he's right. And so you have two choices. You can either go and do this, pursue it. It's going to take you average, 2 years to find a business, and then you're going to run it, and you're going to run it for, between 3 and 4 years. And then you're going to get to some sort of, sustainable level, and then you're going to be able to pivot back, and then you're going to be able to help people, and you're going to have exactly one iteration of knowing how to do it. He goes, or you can determine if you have the right network to be able to engage, and if you have the enough financial ability to be able to potentially not take a paycheck for a year, and then instead focus on creating something that doesn't exist, because there's definitely a demand for it. And then we kept talking about it, and it turns out that in the space, it's not just that we end up helping to solve a veteran transition challenge. It's that we are also helping to solve a legacy business transition problem. And so there's a great deal of legacy businesses that people over 70 years old own. There's not enough people to acquire them. So what's happening right now is that private equity firms, which is just capitalism. So private equity firms are purchasing a lot of them, rolling them up and turning them into single companies. So in that process of it, a secondary effect is that the ancillary businesses that would have supported those businesses in the local environment disappear. So you don't need a private accounting firm anymore, legal firm, like all the other stuff, bookkeeping, whatever, that used to support these small businesses, because now it's all rolled in up into one entity. So I don't think you mean to do it. I don't think that's the intent of those low middle market private equity firms that are doing this. But what ends up happening as an ancillary effect is that you're strip mining a lot of these sort of medium sized to small communities of their businesses. And what is interesting is that the problem that those folks have is that there's not enough prepared buyers to buy the businesses. And now that entrepreneurship through acquisition is such a hot topic for people, there's a lot of people getting into it, just like they did years ago about flipping houses or whatever, that are just trying to make money. What's interesting about veterans is that veterans, most of which, like, and I can't be certain of the exact figures, but as I recall from Army recruiting, is that 80% of veterans would like to return to their home of record that they were recruited from, and only 30% do, or less than 30%. And the primary driving factor is economics. So that's why the Army created the Partnership for Youth Success Program, et cetera, to get people back home and give them a job, so that it, quite frankly, indirectly solves a recruiting problem. So you can say, hey, this person joined the military, they got skills, they came back, they got a great job. That guy recruits better than any dude knocking on doors, because he tells a real story. And so that's great. And so in essence, what you're able to do when you're talking to people about acquisition of small businesses is that now you're directly addressing two different problems. One, it's a veteran transitioning on a viable path to purpose that then can contribute back, a lot of times, to the communities they came from. And now those millions of dollars of leadership education that you got, that is sometimes just sort of ends up being, we'll say, mitigated, because you're in a very large company, or you're in a very, urban, suburban environment. Now that the impact you can have is exponential, because no one in that community has had millions of dollars of experience in leadership. And now you can take that legacy company and, get it to the next stage, help it grow, you know, and then from that, be able to be the person who can travel across team and the local church and all the other stuff. Because those private equity companies, when they purchase those small businesses, one of the very first things to go is any charitable contribution, because there's no positive aspect of it. So if you consider that, you have 5 million small businesses that are transitioning, and you're looking at them potentially tithing. So about 10% of their income usually goes to some sort of charitable giving. Now you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, so 5 million businesses, average valuation is about $5 million. So now you're looking at, a big chunk of change, and then 10% of that ends up being lost potentially if it transitions into someone who's not wanting to run that company as an independent company. And in the meantime, as a transition opportunity, now you're looking at the veteran and their family. And one of the biggest things that's a challenge to veterans when they leave is no psychological safety net. So now I leave. the military. I get a great job at a company. I move to where the company is. So I essentially do another PCS. My family, my kids have to leave school. They have to find new friends. There's no veteran community, probably, because I'm not around a post, because most of our posts are in the middle of nowhere. So now I am not only isolated myself, my whole family has become isolated because I need to be able to provide means for my family to survive. Now, conversely, you could say I lived in Knoxville, Tennessee. That's where I got recruited from. I would like to move back to Knoxville, Tennessee, because that's where grandma and grandpa are. Grandma and grandpa are 75, 80 years old. I know grandma, grandpa, aunts, and uncles would love to be able to see their nieces and nephews or grandkids more, which then makes my life a little bit easier. And now I am seen as essentially a hero coming home to be able to contribute to something that's a legacy business, and all of those psychological stressors become obviated. And it's a great way to then be able to connect those things of, you know, quite frankly, a lot of communities miss their veterans when they leave and then serve and then never come back. Not in the sense that they die somewhere, but they just never come back to their community. It happened in LA all the time. It was one of the biggest objections that I would talk to parents about, is that I don't want my kid to join the military and then move to Texas or Florida. Like, I want them to come back to LA. How can I make sure they come back to LA? That's what I'm most afraid of. And so it's this gets them back home. And then indirectly, going back to the recruiting thing, it's amazing because it's a great recruiting story, because now you're like, oh yeah, you know that, siding company, whatever, and that veteran's making decent money. He's able to support his family, or her family is able to then contribute back to the community and is seen as a value add, versus veteran displaced from his community, isolated by themselves, mental health issues, and that whole other focus on veterans having, you know, everything about, not everything, but a lot of stuff about, the main focus that comes up in most conversations about veterans is, it happened to me in the corporate world. So do you have PTSD? So you don't ask people that. One. Two is that, yeah, it's a stressful situation when you see people die, kill people. Like, it's super stressful. Does that mean I'm disordered because of it? Absolutely not. But I've gone through some significant stresses. It certainly helps for me to be close to family or other people that have experienced that, to be able to mitigate the isolation of the fact that I have lived on a very far end of the spectrum of human existence that very few people can actually identify with. My family can, because they're my value center typically, and that's where I got my character from. And they knew me before war. And so they knew essentially my essence before being changed by war. And then my warrior community knows me as a warrior who has, you know, to your point, has sometimes built a reputation around, yeah, things were hard. And I saw that guy deal with a lot of hard stuff. And I'm going to give him a lot of grace because of it. When you get out, you don't get a lot of grace because you're the new guy. You're a lateral hire in a company. And like, the fact that you did things that are, you've survived ethical challenges that most human beings will never experience in their life, doesn't amount to hill of beans to them, because it's so irrational with their experience. It's just so outlandish that anyone would even do that. And then you're being questioned about, did this person take home, copy paper or paper clips or whatever, and you're like, really? Like, we were given backpacks full of $100 bills and had to account to them to the penny. And you're telling me that you don't trust me to take my mouse home at the end of the day? Like, this is crazy talk. And so it's a really big, dissonance between the two realities. And I think a lot of veterans have a hard time dealing with that. Not because I can't adapt. It's that I don't need to justify to you that you can trust me. I think a lot of us feel that way. It's like, for real? Like, like, I've been completely left alone to my own devices in different countries and didn't do anything crazy. And you're telling me you can't trust me to show
Well,
up
you
to
might
work?
have done something crazy, but not in a bad way, right?
Well, crazy in the sense that it's not normal, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely not normal.
So this, excuse me.
It's going around.
So question I have is, owners in honor. This is
Yeah.
what you're doing now?
Yeah.
And
So
for any of the listeners on here, I want you to hit pause and I want you to go in the description and you can find out and connect with Patrick on Owners in Honor. And he's going to tell you more about it now, but definitely pause, check it out, like, follow, subscribe, all the things. And of course, share this episode with someone that you think would really appreciate it.
yeah, I appreciate that, Danny. Owners and Honors. So Owners and Honors is a veteran nonprofit that supports veterans who are pursuing spouses or Gold Star family members who are pursuing acquisition as their means of entrepreneurship. So what does that mean? So there's other organizations that do boot camps that help prepare people, give them a lot of information. We're a little bit different in the sense that we took more of a special operations approach to it. In like we see ourselves as partners with the veterans where one, we want to prepare people in a base camp. So people are interested in acquisition entrepreneurship that come to us. We then educate them to the point that they self-select. Then they self-select to become a searcher. When they become a searcher, we search with them. So we don't do it for them, but we help them, we advise them through the search. They then are more likely to get better letters of intent. They can find better companies. We're connected to a large network of brokers and searchers and private equity firms and a lot of different things to be able to provide deal access to us. And then from that, you do the transaction. We help them engage them with advisors through the transaction to make sure that they're getting a good deal. And then a fair deal, not necessarily a good deal, but a fair deal. And then from that, then we help them with advising. They get a executive coach that focuses more on the veteran transition piece of it, and then also a small business advisor that then sits with them for up to 10 years, that then helps them grow the company or do a value creation plan. And they are connected to an allied service network that includes everything from corporate insurance to marketing to whatever a company would need, so that you can mitigate the opportunity cost of identifying a problem and then bringing in the right vendor and solving the problem. Typical timeline for that in the business community is about 18 months of a unsophisticated or uneducated acquirer. If you're connected to a network, we can close that usually to about 6 months, which means that you have 12 months of profitability that's saved in the delta. And then from that, then we're also connected to the Exit Planning Institute, which helps people do proper exit planning and succession planning for a company. To make sure that then when the veteran goes to sell, they get tax advising, wealth advising, and exit planning or exit advising to ensure that
Wow.
they get the highest value possible for the company. The goal being that every company that exits is then acquired by a new veteran. So instead of the generational turnover that traditionally happens in those smaller legacy businesses, usually under $5 million, is that you're actually turning it into a generational turnover from veteran to veteran instead. The challenge with a lot of the things that are going on right now in the silver tsunami, gray wave, or whatever with the transitioning business owners is that they assume that a family member would take over the company, and the family members, for whatever reason, are just not interested, which is fine. But it creates a crisis for that company then and now the likelihood of them getting full value for it is lower. The interesting part about veterans is that there's always more of them. So for us, it's really being able to then create the pathway for veterans to keep it within a veteran cycle. And veterans, just like everything else that we talk about in recruiting or anything else, veterans are more likely to vote. They're more likely to give to charity. They're more likely to do all of these different things in your community. So if you can keep those businesses in the hands of people that are more likely to do that, then it's a great way to do it. It's also a great way for the American taxpayer to get back some of that leadership training that they paid for. Like your and my training is a couple $1 million of leadership. And the fact that that can get returned back to Main Street is crazy because typically that's returned only to a Fortune 500 company. And then we're a grain of sand on the beach trying to make an impact. If you're going to a community, just like our concept as Green Berets is that 12 dudes can have a massive impact if you're connected to the community and connected to the network. And then you're an enabling factor to the people that are actually doing so. Veterans with that capability are the same way. And then they would be part of the overall Owners and Honor network that includes also mentors who are former owners that are then able to then mentor people that are currently running companies. So you never it's not to say never, but you mitigate that problem of the secondary transition from, okay, I'm a veteran. That was a tough transition. Now I'm an exiting business owner. That's going to be a tough transition. but there's a gentle way of being able to do it by including them back in the process, just like, the graybeards that work at Robin Sage for us, is that they're still contributing. Could they put on a set of body armor and carry a rifle and, go to somewhere else? Like if World War III happens, am I going to be, leading a special forces team? No, but I could probably sit in a talk in Tampa or in, whatever country that needs to be done. I'm capable of doing that. But it's a great way for those that still want to be able to contribute and don't want to, just go into retirement entirely, to be able to have them still be able to be engaged. And so for us, the things that we need more often than not, we need veterans that are interested in business acquisition to be able to come to us and then be able to determine the pathway. The second thing that we need is business owners to be aware that we're an option for them. So we have currently 200 veterans in the program. They're attempting to relocate right now, or intending to relocate to about 32 different states. So there's different veterans that are all moving. They want to move to different states, which is great for a lot of different people that are trying to leave their business in different states in the country. And that's everywhere from New Jersey to New York to Los Angeles to San Francisco. Like, people really want to go home. And if they can figure out how to make that happen, they really want to make it happen, especially a lot of times for their spouse, because their spouse has been dragged around from post to army post for 20 years. And they're like, hey, if you want to go back closer to where you feel like home, like, let's do that. So that's great. And then from that, then it's the third factor, the third stool of the leg, is people that are interested in becoming, sponsors or partners for us. So those could be community banks, credit unions. There's a couple different mortgage lenders, because but everyone that we have work with us, there's no exclusive arrangements. We want to make sure that we vet all of them so that they're supportive of the veterans and supportive of the veteran cause. And all of the, whether it's the COO, CEO, whatever, are all people that we want to be able to get on a red phone. And if there's something wrong, we want to be able to help jiggle it loose. So we don't want to have a anonymous relationship with a gigantic corporation. We want to be able to have real relationships, because we want to really have that genuine effect on communities. And we want to see them reap the benefit of their investment in what it is that we're.
What a powerful organization, and your concept is fantastic. And I love the longevity of it. And like, across the board, this is what they call the win-win. All parties are winning. I think it's fantastic. If you want to learn more about Owners in Honor, definitely check out Patrick. Go in the description again, pause, go in there, support, follow. Or if you're a veteran and you're interested and you're thinking, geez, maybe I'd like to be an entrepreneur and own a business, connect with them. He'll help you out. He's an amazing person. You've heard his stories. He's genuine. He's real. And thank you, man, for being on. I can't thank you enough. Your stories have been incredible. Your service, your tenacity. Really, brother. From one Green Beret to, and say, I'm choking up a little bit with some of this stuff. Just, you're doing it, man. And I try and have guests on that I believe have the asset mindset, understand that they take ownership of their life. They surround themselves with good people and good environments and are being assets to others. You have it, brother. So thank you for coming on here, sharing your story. All you
Thanks.
listeners, thanks for being here. And definitely like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs it. And more importantly than anything, always make sure, own your power.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, thank you very much for having me.